Britain's ambassador to the United States and its national security advisor spoke to Spicer and White House National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster to voice their displeasure. Vlad, the White House has acknowledged these concerns, but not offered an apology.
Major, what do these kinds of comments coming from the President of the United States tell us about how the White House has been handling these wiretapping claims, and what impact could this have on the Intelligence Committee hearing next week when FBI Director James Comey is expected to testify?
Well, let's take the back half of your question first, Vlad. That committee hearing is going to try to elicit from the FBI Director an absolute statement that ends any remaining ambiguity, should any exist outside of this White House, as to whether or not this surveillance occurred. And that should, members of Congress certainly hope, put this to rest. And that's not just Democrats, but Republicans wish this issue could be resolved once and for all, even if the President of the United States clings aggressively, one might say tenaciously, to this original and unsubstantiated allegation. Now, what do the comments tell us? That the President is still using the power of his office and that of the press secretary, the podium of the White House, to talk about things that have little or no factual basis behind them, and in the case of this allegation against the British government, created an uproar that could have, and I would argue should have been anticipated by anyone in the National Security Council who would have cared to look at what Sean Spicer was preparing to read at yesterday's briefing. If they had seen that, they would have said, don't talk about that. Don't even invest it with any of the White House prestige at all. If you do, you're going to cause an immediate conflict with the British government and an intelligence agency with which we cooperate all the time and rely upon as not just an ally, but an interlocutor in the exchange of counterterrorism intelligence and lots of other valuable intelligence. Don't go down that road. Yet the White House went down that road in the person of Sean Spicer. And when the White House today acknowledged these conversations, the statement came out of Sean Spicer's office, not the National Security Council, which means it took ownership for this particular conflict with the British government, as it should have. But an experienced White House, a diplomatically sensitive White House, would never have created this conflict in the first place.
Major, you've covered the White House for many years. Explain to our viewers, when the press secretary to the president is at that podium, does he speak for the President of the United States? So when the president says, look, we were just reporting on or parroting what we saw on Fox News, but Sean Spicer in those comments, when he stands at that podium, for example, and he retorts to a reporter's question, does the president stand by these allegations? And he says, yes, he does. He is speaking for the president, am I right?
Of course he is speaking for the president. And the podium at the White House, occupied by the president, occupied by any senior administration official, a cabinet secretary, or the press secretary, is and historically has been a place of prestige, credibility, and political clout. And when any issue arises for any American president that questions that credibility or undermines that credibility, that which is typically associated with the White House is damaged. That was true of previous American presidents. It damaged Richard Nixon when he at a White House podium in the East Room said, your president's not a crook, in the context of Watergate. That lack of credibility created a credibility gap for him and his administration. Other American presidents have had to admit things at that podium. Ronald Reagan did in Iran-Contra. Bill Clinton did in the Monica Lewinsky case. So what you say there matters, and it matters not just in an American political context, but overseas as well. Nations, both hostile and friendly to the United States, spend a lot of time looking over White House transcripts because they take their cues from what the White House says about policy, about politics, and about its intentions. And so you can argue, as the White House is, hey, we're just talking about things that were out there. We're just summarizing reports. When you summarize a report, one that's unsubstantiated, one that the network on which it appeared doesn't stand by, you are investing it with White House credibility. It's no longer just a report that's out there. The White House is identifying it as something that carries with it credibility according to the White House. There's a process by which you're essentially distilling it for the country and investing it with the prestige of this institution. That's something this White House either doesn't appreciate in this case, or if it does, didn't value it enough to want to stand behind it.
All right, Major, let me ask you about this now. Next week, the White House is expected to vote on the House Republican bill to overhaul the Affordable Care Act. The president met with the Republican Study Committee, a group of conservative Republicans. They apparently came up with some changes for it. What can you tell us about that?
So the House of Representatives, through its majority leader, Kevin McCarthy, said today this will be voted on Thursday of next week. That's a very ambitious timeline. And the president did some efforts, or undertook some efforts today, to persuade some no votes to vote for this emerging package to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And the president says all 12 of those Republican Study Committee conservatives came in either as no or undecided, and all walked out as 100% committed yes votes. We'll see when the tally is actually held. Based on my conversations with the White House and Republicans on Capitol Hill, this bill still does not have the votes necessary to pass. That's not saying they won't have them, but I guarantee you, Vlad, if the votes aren't there, the promise for a vote to be held on Thursday will also not come to pass, because this leadership and this president will not put a bill on the floor that doesn't have the votes. So it's a tautology. When the bill is on the floor, it has the votes, and not a moment sooner.
And Major, we should point out to our viewers, on your podcast, The Takeout, this week you spoke with House Freedom Caucus Chair Mark Meadows. He also is chair of another group of conservative Republicans in the House. What can you tell us about that?
So yes, this is right in the center of this entire conversation the country's having, the Republican Party's having, and the Trump White House is having. Can this bill survive? Can it make it through the House? Can the repeal and replace dynamic continue on legislatively? And Mark Meadows told us right now it doesn't have the votes. He is going to work on behalf of his fellow Freedom Caucus, that's Tea Party-inspired conservatives, to try to create a deal. He told us something that he'd never said before. He has a meeting scheduled on Tuesday of next week with moderate House Republicans, because both moderates and conservatives have problems with this bill. And he said he's going to try to bring them all together to create that necessary majority. 216 votes is the key threshold in the House to build a legislative project that can survive. And Meadows told us there's not much time. Number one, it's a do-or-die situation. Number two, and if this legislative gambit fails, repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, he said much of the Trump agenda that's supposed to come after that, tax reform, spending cuts, building the wall on the southern border, will also likely die. So he said the time is of the essence, and the political stakes could hardly be higher.
All right, we'll be anticipating that podcast, that discussion. Major Garrett at the White House for us. Thank you, Major.
Sure.